Coming up on this week's show, the SNES Satellaview is resurrected.
The latest in keychain consoles.
And we jump into the world of arcades with Kim Justice.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our lovely friends at Bitmap Books. Now, one of the best books that they've done in the last year, N64, a visual compendium, telling the story of the console that changed the gaming world. That moment when Nintendo fully embraced 3D and covering all the big games on the platform, more than 150 N64 titles. Super Mario 64 is in there, of course, GoldenEye 007, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, and lots more as well, and weighing in at a massive 436 pages. If you love the N64, this is a real celebration of it. You can check it out in the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our friends at PCBWay. Now, if you're working on anything over the summer, you know they offer fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and services like 3D printing and injection molding. And of course, they're massive supporters of the retro community. So get an instant quote right now on their website at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 442, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And very nice to have you joining us for our little Friday retro gaming session, when every week we bring you up to speed on what's been happening in the wonderful wide world of retro gaming and technology, talking about all the big headlines that have made the news sites over the last week and our social timelines, and of course welcoming on a special guest in the second half of the show each week. And we have got a friend of the podcast this week who's working on something very exciting at the moment that we'll talk more about in just a second. But actually, speaking of which, I imagine that you are quite pleased to have a bit of a break from packing boxes and sticking labels on things today, Ravi.
Yeah. It's been quite therapeutic, actually. Yeah. I quite like it. I've got a label printer. I've properly got on it. Our book is on sale at the moment, and we've been selling copies all over the world. It's really good to see, and we had a Kickstarter, but now it's available for the public on our website.
Yeah, but we did say last week, we only had about 80 copies left and they're going quick. So if you want one, it's there now or never. Like we did mention last week, the Retro Hour book is now on general sale, so get them while they're hot. Head to our website, theretrohour.com, if you would like to order yours this weekend. Speaking of this weekend, actually, by the time this episode lands, you and I will be on a plane.
Yeah, we're going over to Norway to one of our favourite shows, actually, Retro Messe, and amazingly, it's their 10th anniversary. It's going to be a hell of a show. Are you looking forward to it, Dan? Yeah,
well, like you said, we're going to be there this weekend. It's going to be happening in Sandefjord in Norway this weekend, 17th and 18th of August. We are going to be on stage hosting a lot of the panels there as well. And we've got some amazing guests. Chris Hulsbeck's going to be there. Metal Jesus Rocks as well, who has been a big supporter of our podcast for many years. So going to be nice to finally meet Jason in person. A few of the guys from Rare are going to be there. Kev Bayliss, Heather Stevens as well from Core Design. And we're going to be doing a special panel, actually, via a translator, because it's not very often that we get Japanese guests on the podcast due to the language barrier. But this one, we're going to be recording and hopefully playing out on the show in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, which is just an amazing opportunity. Yoko Shimomura, and I just can't wait for this interview. Behind the music of Kingdom Hearts, also Street Fighter 2, absolutely classic stuff. It's going to be really nice to talk about piano, and it's going to be interesting with this dynamic as well of a translator. Let's see how that works.
Yeah, so if you're going to be in Norway this weekend, I know we have got quite a crew out there now as well, so we're looking forward to that. We're going to be landing there on Friday night, so if you're around this weekend, come say hi. Now, we have got a friend of the podcast on this week who's working on something very exciting at the moment. Kim Justice, who is, I think, thanks to for us all, one of our favourite YouTubers, does some of the most incredible in-depth gaming documentaries on YouTube, and she has for many years. And it makes sense that, if any YouTuber was going to make a book, it would be Kim.
Yeah, I think Kim's research is absolutely crazy for every video, really in-depth, comes out with, facts that we don't usually have. And, she's been writing for Wireframe magazine as well. It is no longer available, but it was a great mag. Also, Retro Gamer magazine as well. So she's got a big background and history of writing, and coming together with Numbskull Design, she's come up with this absolutely amazing book. It looks great. The 80s edition of Arcade Decades. And it's going to stand out from other books because it's going to have a bit of a Kim Justice flavour in there.
Yeah, this looks absolutely fantastic. We've had a sneak peek at the Kickstarter, which actually does launch today. And, she obviously goes into real in-depth in the interview, but I love how in-depth this book's going to be. It's not just like, this is the arcade machine, this is the arcade game, a little bit about it. It's kind of like the legacy of it. And also she's researched like the boards that are used in there, all the components and everything. So it tells you all about that. There's going to be over 100 arcades featured in this book. So it does look
all original
fantastic.
Photos as well. Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, it looks great.
Well, like you said, that's launching on a Kickstarter today when the podcast comes out, Friday, 16th of August. So, of course, there'll be a link to that in the show notes as well. And our special guest reminiscing all about arcades and talking about her incredible new book, Kim Justice, on the show in around half an hour from now. Before that, though, being another busy week in the world of retro. So let's hop into the news stories. This one is a headline I definitely didn't expect to see. The Satellaview service is being resurrected, kind of. Now, for people not familiar with the Satellaview, this was basically like a satellite modem service back in the 90s in Japan, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was getting the SNES online in the 90s. And what it would do is it was kind of like a timed experience. So they would put exclusive games for download. It's so hard to describe because it's so interesting.
It's kind of like a paid-up service. It was like a TV channel. They'd blast games down
perfect.
there at certain times and schedules.
Yeah, they would say on Friday at 5 o'clock in the evening, the remake of The Legend of Zelda is going to come out. So they did the original Nintendo Legend of Zelda. They remade it on SNES, and it was exclusive to the Satellaview. And you would then download it to your cartridge on your Satellaview cartridge, which went into the top of the Super Nintendo, and then you had like the modem on the bottom of the Super Nintendo, and you would download it, and it'd be a timed event, so you'd get like an hour to play the game.
Yeah, and they'd do competitions as well.
Yeah.
They'd have like a little cup and stuff, and they'd have events going on as well, and everyone could kind of join in and compete, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the reason we're talking about this is, obviously that service was on the SNES back in the mid to late 90s, only in Japan, but it has been kind of the thing of legend, really, hasn't it, since YouTubers have made documentaries and that kind of thing on it. And a lot of people have thought it would have been amazing to play that. Well, now you can kind of get a similar experience where there's something appropriately titled the Satellaview Plus that is available now.
Yeah, so this is a developer called Howling Fox Uruku, who has taken to Twitter/X to explain that there's a user group for it at the moment, and they need Super Nintendo developers, and modders. They need their games for this. So this has actually been ongoing for quite a while, kind of like undercover, if you will. But the reason now people are talking about it and stuff is because they've come out and said, we need your games because we want to start streaming them on, the Satellaview Plus, which I think is really cool because all these indie devs can get involved in it as well. But it's kind of weird because at the moment they haven't got it working on original hardware just yet, have they?
I can't imagine how it would work on original hardware because this, it's not going over the satellites like Satellaview was. Yeah. This is something that's delivered over the internet.
Well, I guess it would be just changing the frequencies, or you could broadcast it from a satellite.
It must be quite expensive, though, for a team of homebrew developers to do that.
It's only data, though, isn't it? It's not,
at the moment, the way it works is it works on emulation on a PC, and they've kind of explained how this works. You download the Satellaview Plus client onto your PC, that then they do like broadcast over the internet, like the original service at set times. So there is a program schedule on their website. For example, like tomorrow at 8 a.m. till 2 p.m, Super Bomberman. Is going to be broadcast over there. Then, a load of Japanese games are broadcast on this as well.
I think they're going to hack a satellite. They're going to get people to get the dishes and put it outside the house.
Yeah, I was going to say, having a satellite carrier may be slightly out of this project's reach so far, but
I think it's interesting that what they're trying to do is they're trying to redo the service, the way of delivering, streaming these games, but not the original titles. Maybe they'll have some or a few of the original titles, but there's a piece of hardware called the FX Pack Pro, and that enables you to play the old Satellaview games on it as well. So this is something kind of totally different where they're going to be reintroducing this service, and kind of like, when they got the Wii U back online, or they had the GameCube online and these recent services that have happened.
Well, there's an article that we'll link up on one of our favourite websites, Time Extension, that embeds a few of the tweets, and there's a trailer in there as well. I love the interface on this too. I mean, having obviously never played the original Satellaview, this looks really cool the way it works. I don't know if it's like the original, but basically there's a little town square, and they've got a guy walking around who then, you walk up to houses, like there's a game museum, and it allows you to join the games when they're streaming.
I believe that is how it was originally from documentaries I've watched on this. As like you say, it was Japan exclusive in the 90s, so we've not played this. But I'm pretty sure this looks familiar to me. I'm pretty sure this is how it was displayed back then. So it's like Ravi says, it's a recreation of it, but then within emulation. I mean, it would be cool if they could get it through a satellite and get it on hardware and everything, but
I think, because it's like a satellite modem, so they might be able to, hack something together that goes into the modem.
I'm looking at this article, then it does mention that it's also compatible with the Super Disc Plus, which is something else I wasn't aware of, which is apparently a team of devs are actually recreating the unreleased Super Nintendo CD.
Oh, really? What, and it's compatible with it?
Well, it's got an Ethernet port on the back of it. Oh. So you can hook it up to your network. Because there have been, I mean, as we've talked about in this podcast before, there have been a couple of games made for the SNES CD.
Yeah.
That people have been, playing on emulation. There's that Super Boss Gaiden that we talked about a couple of years ago, most famously. But yeah, there is a group at the moment, there's a YouTube channel called Super Disc Plus, that they only started about 2 weeks ago. And they're actually going to be doing a Super Famicom CD unit, they're calling this, in a shell like the Satellaview that will attach to the bottom of your Super Nintendo and allow you to play Super Disc games like Super Boss Gaiden and Magic Floor on your Super Nintendo. But yeah, the thing about this is it's going to have an Ethernet jack on the back, so you will be able to play the Satellaview service on there as well.
It's going to be very niche, isn't it, this thing?
Yeah. So that'll be the way that you play it on the original hardware then, won't it?
So at the moment it's emulation.
Yeah.
And Super Disc Plus,
when it comes out, which, I mean, it does sound like an exciting time.
It's amazing because this is hardware that I've never played with or never seen.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting to see that stuff's coming because, to be honest, I didn't really know about this until this article. I was like, oh, wow, there was this service. There's so many of these strange online services that existed for consoles, long before the time of Xbox Live.
Just need someone to bring SegaNet back now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's next. We'll link that up if you want to keep an eye on that. And the Super Disc Plus as well, we'll keep an eye on the progress of that. Those articles will be in this week's show notes. Speaking of Sega as well, actually, this is a game that is very well regarded, one of the best action games on the Mega Drive. Are you a fan of Landstalker, Joe? Is this something you've played before?
Never actually played Landstalker. I've played Alundra, which was a spiritual successor to it for the PS1, and Alundra 2, but I never played Landstalker, but it always looked like a very advanced game for the Mega Drive. I don't know how late it was into the Mega Drive's life cycle or anything, but I always thought graphically and the kind of like style of gameplay, etc. of it looked really unique and late Mega Drive, if that makes sense.
Came out 1992 in Japan,
all right,
and 93 in the UK.
So kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah, so this is a game that I've heard of. I'm not massively into my kind of. Would you say it's a role playing game? I'm not massively into my role playing games.
It's kind of like a action adventure kind of RPG, kind of in the vein of Zelda kind of style. Yeah.
Isometric kind of view.
Yeah, so it's isometric view, and it's kind of played on a grid, kind of like if you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, the levels, the isometric levels, the dungeons, if you will, the areas you're in and stuff. It's an isometric view, and it is actually grid based, but then you can walk around on it and stuff. So it kind of looks at a glance, it looks like a little bit of a strategy game, but it isn't. You do just run around, swinging your sword, casting magic, etc., fighting enemies, solving puzzles, etc. But the reason we are talking about this is there is now a Landstalker build your own Landstalker tool. Landstalker Maker. And this is a labour of love that has come from somebody who wanted a Landstalker 2, which was talked about for many, many years. But unfortunately, the creator of Landstalker did actually pass away in 2023. So this developer has taken things into his own hands to make Landstalker Creator, or Landstalker Editor, it's also called.
So you can make your own game then if you
So
wanted
you
to
can make your own Landstalker game. So once again, at a glance, I thought, oh, it will use kind of like, kind of level design. Like it will use the grid base, like a little bit like Mario Maker. Like it'll be kind of like an isometric view of squares, and you just kind of build in your tiles and you put your enemies in and stuff like that. I then watched the video on this, and it is incredibly in depth what you can actually create and do with this. Have you guys seen the video?
Video's like, it's like 25 minutes long, isn't it?
Well, what you can do is you can edit all the sprites, edit property there, block set, enhance the room as well, and also the room map. So, I think it's kind of like a games engine. You could actually create an entirely new game based within this. And I think this is really cool to see editors being created for games. I always wanted to see one for Syndicate. I think they were working on one years ago, Syned or something like that. But I remember like Unreal Tournament used to have one when I was a kid. And I always love when editors come out because you get to see some great stuff. I've just seen Fallout London is coming out for Fallout 4. And that's like an entirely new kind of world that we wouldn't have thought of before. So it's great to see this, and I hope to see something interesting coming out of it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there as well, Ravi. As soon as you said like Syndicate there, those kind of like isometric games are actually perfect for this editing tool. So I'm sure you could, because of what he's essentially done is downloaded the game's assets into this editor, which he's made from the ground up by the looks of things. But I couldn't see why you couldn't do that with other games, with modification of it, etc. But yeah, it's like you say, it's massively in depth. Like you can change pretty much every aspect of any sprite or tile or background detail. So the things you can create in it is extremely creative. I thought it was going to be kind of like along the lines of, I used to mess around with RPG Maker in the mid 2000s, and that was quite like you just pick your sprite and you just kind of drop it in. You pick your enemy, you just kind of drop it in. And I thought it was going to be a little bit like that. But yeah, this is crazy in depth.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I mean, like I said, 25-minute video, which goes really in depth into everything that you can do on here as well. One thing, I'm looking at the GitHub page now, and I imagine it doesn't really explain it all that well. I imagine this is something you probably, maybe if you watched the full video, they explained it at some point. But I imagine this will be able to take the original ROM, kind of modify it, and you'll be able to play it on the original hardware.
I imagine so.
Again, yeah.
I mean, he plays it within emulation on the video, so I can't see why you couldn't put this into an EverDrive if it was running through emulation pretty like seamlessly.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too crazy and you make like a huge file that's too big. Kind of thing.
Yeah, make the second game and suddenly it won't run because you made it right out of memory. I spent 10 years on this. So that looks really cool if you're a fan of the original game, which I was thinking then, where have I seen it before? It is available on the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, sweet.
Mega Drive service on there, which I think I've seen it on there before. But yeah, I might give that a play actually, because title I'd heard of, but yeah, nothing I've actually played in the past, but seems like it's getting a lot of love at the moment. And if you're tired of waiting for the sequel, make your own. That is available now, so I'll put that in this week's show notes. Now, it's always nice to see classic software getting preserved, particularly to this level. Now, it's not very often that we get excited about word processors, but this one has received quite a bit of attention in recent years because this is actually the one that made the headlines a few years ago because Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin, he actually writes all his scripts using, I think it's a 386 laptop he's got running a word processor called WordStar.
Yeah, have you used WordStar before?
No, I haven't now. I'm aware of it only because of really reading those articles about George Martin, really. I wasn't a PC user in this era. The first kind of word processors I used would have been at school on the BBC Micro and then the Acorn Archimedes. I think by the time,
Yeah, you were on the odd ones. Like WordStar was so big.
My first word processor was a Folio on the
literally
BBC Micro.
All my uncles were into tech and they were like, you have to get WordStar. It was huge. My mum wrote her PhD on WordStar, and the thing about it was it worked on so many different systems, but it didn't require mouse input. It was just keyboard straight away. So you'd be typing, but you'd use the control keys to set different things, italics, bold. You could do everything with the control key. So
A lot of keyboard shortcuts to remember.
Oh, yes. But when you went onto Word, that slowed you down because you had to use a mouse and click things. WordStar, you could have someone talking and straight away, you could touch type and just type in real time. And it was a real method of kind of doing word processing that's totally different to what we do today. It kind of reminds me more of like coding. It's around that kind of era, and it's something quite therapeutic, and it also feels a bit pure. It's kind of like a mix between the electronic typewriters as well that you had at the time when you type stuff out, and it's a real different way of doing it, and amazingly it's not available for any modern systems. There's not a modern version of WordStar, and that may change now.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, a text editor definitely has its place because I like I said, I used Folio on the BBC Micro, and then when I got my Amiga, I think I used Transwrite, if you remember that on the Amiga.
Yes, yeah.
And then ProText.
Yep.
Mainly off magazine cover demo, discs and that kind of thing. And I think, is it Cygnus Editor, CED? Use that quite a lot on the Amiga. But yeah, just been able to bash out text really quickly. I mean, today, I've got Microsoft Word, Office 365 and everything on my PC, but often I'll just fire up kind of Notepad if I'm using Windows or text edit on the Mac. Just to bash it if
you can touch type, you don't even need to look at the screen with WordStar. You can look at the person that's speaking and do it. And with a mouse, you really need to have to do that. So it does put you in a different world. And that's why, there's someone like R.R. Martin's been using it to write on, because it's that kind of pure way of writing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, the reason we're talking about this is there is now an archive that's been put together. This is by the award-winning author Robert J. Sawyer, he's one of the biggest fans of this software. So he's basically put together the final version of WordStar. He spent weeks putting all this together. Not just the WordStar program, but also he's made scans of all the original manuals that are over 1,000 pages long. So we're talking the days when a word processor needed a 1,000-page manual with it. Like we said, a lot of keyboard shortcuts, I imagine. He's turned those into fully searchable PDF files as well. The packages he's built have even got MS-DOS emulators in there as well. So they're pretty much plug and play.
So
you can run WordStar on the modern Windows.
I think it would be something that if someone did a native version of it, it would run just amazingly well on new modern stuff. And to the point that, it started to get cloned. So we had an Amstrad PCW, and it had New Star and New Word, and obviously Alan Sugar has his own different versions of it. But it was massively popular, and then Word came in and kind of destroyed everything. But it's great to see because you can also do HTML, CSS stuff in there in the future. So maybe some kind of hybrid will come out of this. But good to see that it's available in an emulation form as well. I've really forgot about my passion for WordStar.
Yeah, Ravi's going to write a book on it now.
That's it, yeah. I'm going to WordStar, guys. I'm converted. That's it.
So if you want to check that out, that is a free download, and I'll put that in this week's show notes. Now, there seems to be another little trend that's going on recently. This is games consoles that can hang off your keyring. We're talking about the that Wii keyring console that someone made a couple of weeks ago. This one, though, is something that you can actually get yourself, and it is a follow-up to a device that we covered on the podcast, God, it must be 4 or 5 years ago now. Do you remember we talked about this console called the Thumbie?
I vaguely remember the Thumbie. There's been about 5 iterations of the Thumbie.
Right.
From 2011 to, like you say, a few years ago where we covered it. These are micro consoles, and this is the Thumbie Color.
I'd say these are nano consoles.
Well, yeah,
make it even
nano
smaller,
consoles.
Yeah. So we've had the mini consoles, and now we're onto the micro or the
We're
nanos.
onto the microscopic micro consoles. This is the Thumbie Color that has just launched on Kickstart and has absolutely smashed its goal already. Naturally, they needed £19,000. They're on £72,000 already with 27
Still 27 days.
Yeah, 27 days to go. But this is a nano console based on the Game Boy Advance in terms of the presentation of it. Mm-hmm. So it's a tiny little Game Boy Advance, if you will, which is only 51 millimeters wide, so 5 centimeters wide by 30 millimeters tall by 11 millimeters in depth. This is tiny, 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 kind of like size of a little box of matches, if you will. And it's not just your standard kind of like, oh, here's a little console, handheld console, which you put an SD card into it. The actual selling point of this console is you actually develop your own games for it.
So it's not an emulation box.
It's not an emulation. It's not emulation. It does use a Raspberry Pi processor in there.
Yeah, which is quite a hefty processor as well.
Yeah.
150 megahertz dual processor with an FPU, which is like kills any Amiga.
Yeah, and they've got it to the size of a matchstick, apparently.
And it is just unbelievable that these like microcontrollers and they're actually this cheap and available and people can use them.
Yeah, exactly. And the company behind this, making it all in-house themselves, they pride themselves on making it all, all the motherboards and everything, all the processors and stuff, they create it all themselves, at the factory. And it's going to be $50, so around £45 if you want to buy the standard purple one, or you can get the clear shell one, where you get the purple shell and the clear shell and you can swap them out for $55.
You know what amazes me and really shows me the scale of it is when they're plugging in the USB-C on the pictures.
Yeah, and it's like half the size of it.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, amazingly, it's actually got internal rumble motor in there as well.
That's nuts.
So it's got, forced feedback in there, the console will rumble, etc.
It's got a speaker inside.
It's got a speaker inside. Yeah. It boasts 8 buttons, but it is an A and B, L and R button, and then
it's got shoulder buttons on it.
Yeah, so it's the same as the original GBA layout.
These are not built if you've got sausage fingers, are they?
No, I don't think that'd
be a bit dainty. Well, it's got 5 games out of the box as well that come included with it, and it's backwards compatible with the original Thumbie, which was black and white, a monochrome console. And apparently there's over 100 games have been made for that now.
Yeah, over 100 games for the original Thumbie, which, they weren't colour. They were monochrome games, but they, like you say, they will all be completely backwards compatible with this. In terms of graphically, I would say it's 8-bit. Would you agree?
Yeah, I wonder if you could run the Pico 8 stuff on this as well, because there's loads of games on that. Maybe that would be
actually
cool.
recompile for it, I'd imagine. Yeah, I think you're right there, Joe, in terms of graphic. Yeah, I'd say maybe later kind of 8-bit style games.
Yeah. They kind of remind me of like Java mobile games from the early 2000s, but better, more responsive. Very similar to that, but it's still very cool.
Yeah. Don't get long nails if you're going to play on this as well. It'll be impossible.
Keep your nails trimmed nice. But yeah, I think this looks awesome. And I was just thinking, actually, I'm back to Kickstarter for a few months. I think I might actually get involved in this one because I love the fact that it's a whole new platform as well.
Yeah,
because that was one thing I was worried about, and I got out. Is it just going to be a device where you emulate?
I would just leave this in my pocket, and it would go through the wash. Like my first time I got you.
Yeah. Well, I was saying the other week, wasn't I, that you had a bit of a keyring clean out recently, Joe.
Yeah,
and I still got keys from 25 years ago, my keyring that I did get rid of. So probably the last thing I need is something else to clutter up my keyring. But I've got to admit, I do really want one of these. They look really cool. Yeah, so I think I will. This is running on Kickstarter right now, so if you want to back that, you've got a couple of weeks left. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Now, there's one more story to talk about before we hop into our chat with Kim Justice. Apart from the patrons, we're going to get an extra couple of news stories because we do that every week for our wonderful patrons. Let's talk about this game now. Shockingly, we are only a couple of months away from spooky season, being that it is mid-August. I'm sure Halloween will be here before we know it. And we're talking last week, already thinking about games that we might want to play around that time. You and I always do that, Joe, don't we?
Yeah.
Pick out some spooky games.
I'm getting into the spooky vibe. I'm going into the woods and watching a film. There's a film festival when they do.
I was going to say, not on your own, with your laptop.
Yeah, no, it's like a mass participation, and they have people at the back, jumping out behind the trees and stuff. It's well cool.
Well, if you want to really step up the spookiness in time for the end of October, this is a game that actually comes out in October. 2 games that are 2D horror platformers.
This looks fantastic. So this is Retro Realms, Halloween, and Ash versus Evil Dead games coming to us on the 18th of October, coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox, Steam, and interestingly Switch as well. Nintendo stepping their game up with the horror games. This looks absolutely fantastic. So this is 2 games which are actually compatible with each other as well, apparently. But based on the Halloween movie franchise by John Carpenter. So this will be the first Halloween game since the Halloween game for the Atari, I believe, in like 1980.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
Really?
for Atari 2600. And then obviously an Evil Dead game as well. And they are 2D arcade-style retro, kind of beat-em-ups, slash-em-ups, platformers, whatever you want to call them.
We're trying to talk about the graphical style before, weren't
Yeah.
we? We kind of said it's a bit Streets of Rage 4 kind of style. Well, there's got to be a name for this style of graphics. It's not quite pixel art, but it's...
Yeah, you said there's got to be a kind of name for this because of it's sort of pixel art. Like if you kind of zoom in and, on some of the screenshots, it is pixel art, but it's very nice. It's very modern. In terms of the gameplay of it, it kind of reminds me in a way. Imagine DuckTales for the NES, where you can
with lots of blood.
With lots of blood and lots of violence, and you can kind of bounce around and jump around on the screen. And, they've captured the essence of the franchises really well as well. I'm a lot more familiar with Evil Dead than I am Halloween, I must admit. But from what I can see on the Evil Dead game, because the trailer covers both games, there's a lot of, references to the films and the TV show as well. And the Deadites are in there and everything, and you're just fighting lots of zombies and demons. So right up my street. Played it safe on Halloween by the looks of things, because obviously Ash from Evil Dead is a hero. Michael Myers from Halloween, is he's a slasher. He's a slasher villain.
Yeah. He's not a nice guy.
He kills teenage girls and stuff, teenagers. But they've played it safe. It looks like you're killing kind of like possessed people or like insane asylum people.
Which really, in Halloween films, that'd probably be his mates, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But just looks like a fun game. Like you say,
it's the thing that stands out to me is obviously you've got the pixel styles, you've got the cleanliness that's with the look of it. It looks really clean and sharp, but also the lighting effects are amazing.
Yeah,
the blood splatter on the screen is a next kind of thing that you're seeing, and there's blood dripping down. Also, some of the smoke effects are really impressive.
Yeah,
and I think that's what really gives it some depth with the game and the lighting. It's really well done.
It does look really, really good. And Retro Realms recently brought us the Contra reboot, which I actually mentioned on the show, or I might have mentioned it in the Patreon part of the show recently, that Contra games haven't done so well recently, but I've actually read that the recent Retro Realms Contra game is actually really good.
Right.
And this looks really good as well, so I have high hopes for it. Hopefully it'll be a good one.
Yeah, it's only a couple of months to wait, so if you want to check out the trailer, which Joe did track down after looking around a few websites, looks really good, so we'll link that up. You can check it out as well. Right then, patrons, stay tuned. A couple of extra stories to talk about for you in just a minute, because we do that every week on the podcast for our wonderful patrons. A reminder that your support is gratefully received. It really helps us keep the lights on and pay all our bills and the running costs and anything we need. We really appreciate it, and not just financially. We love the community.
Yeah,
and
I can't wait to come and see some of you outside Retro Mesa and have a pint. And an exclusive for the patrons as well as the After Hours podcast. And we've done 43 episodes of that, which is absolutely insane. So, if you sign up, you just get this list of 43 episodes, tons of content in there. And sometimes those episodes go on like definitely over an hour, sometimes
nearly 2 hours.
Hitting 2, yeah. So there's tons of content there. It's great.
Yeah, and there'll be a new episode of the After Hours coming out before the end of the month as well. Speaking of end of the month, Patrons Hangout coming up next Sunday, 25th of August.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to join us for that, and it's a very good time to sign up.
Also, if you can't patron us, just please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us as well.
Yeah, it gets those charts. So any support you can give us, hugely appreciated. And of course, we like to induct all new members into the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is the Retro Hour Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame!
And a big thank you to our latest patrons. Thank you to Bruce Sayer,
Jürgen Pischler,
Jason Morley,
and Peter Home, who all joined us on Patreon over the last couple of weeks. Massively appreciated. And if you'd like to join our wonderful patrons community, all the details are on our website at theretrohour.com. Okay, then, so we're going to be chatting to this week's special guest, the amazing Kim Justice, coming up on the podcast in just a minute. Before we do that, let's take a quick sec to give a big thank you to another big supporter of this podcast, and that is, you know, the one. It's our friends with that sound, the sound that we love, our friends at Shopify, who have kindly sponsored this week's episode of the Retro Hour podcast. And Shopify has been an absolute game changer for us over the last couple of years. I mean, not only have we used it, you know, for our website that we're doing at the moment, selling our books, spent a lot of time on Shopify over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in love with Shopify. It's so easy. It is a true all-in-one commerce platform. I've been able to set up on there, you know, just having the ability to print out labels straight away, pay for all the postage, have tracking in there. Oh, it's just so easier than any other system that I've used.
Yeah, because I mean, we were saying today, because you're sending all these books out that people have bought through our website, we wish Kickstarter was as simple as this.
Yes,
Shopify is, because it's so much easier to use. If you haven't heard of Shopify before, though, if you sell anything online or in person as well, so everyone's doing a bit of a side hustle, a lot of people becoming their own boss right now. Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. And it's revolutionizing millions of businesses all around the world. And we did mention that they do in-person selling as well. They've got those little shop-ready point-of-sale systems. You might have seen us using these at events to sell our books on as well. All your sales channels are covered. They do the e-commerce platform too, of course, and even get you selling across your social media marketplaces, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok.
It's awesome because you have that you can have that physical store or you can have that virtual store as well.
100%. And also they've got industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth as well. They've got award-winning help and extensive business course library. So when you need it, that support is there every step of the way. So if you sell anything at all, in person or online, it's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. Now, we have got you, of course, an incredible offer if you want to try this out. You can sign up and check out Shopify for just £1 a month for a trial period using our exclusive link. So head to this. They'll know that we sent you, helps out the podcast, shopify.co.uk/retrohour, all lowercase, and I'll put it in the show notes as well, shopify.co.uk/retrohour, and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot more of this. All right, then, well, thank you for checking out the news this week. We'll have more for you on next Friday's podcast. Remind you, if you want to get hold of one of our books, the website, theretrohour.com. They are on general sale right now. But like we said, they are quickly going, so get them while they're hot. We'll hopefully have a few to sell out in Norway this weekend as well. If you're going to be joining us for Retro Messa, we will see you there tomorrow, and we'll get a few of those panels recorded and play them out on the podcast over the next few weeks as well. Right, then keep it here. We're going to be talking to a good friend of the show, the wonderful Kim Justice, reminiscing about the world of arcades and talking about her incredible new book, next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Kim Justice. Now, Kim is a long-term friend of the show. You know, Kim's been on the podcast since, well, episode 44, those really early days, and then episode 126, and a special panel that we had on episode 300. Having Kim back on is absolutely awesome because Kim has a really interesting project in the works, which we're going to talk about, which is all about arcade games. And we're also going to have a little bit of a catch-up. If you don't know Kim, Kim is an absolutely amazing YouTuber who's also doing contributions for Retro Gamer magazine and done some fantastic writing. I love watching her videos. They're really, really knowledgeable. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. And we were kind of wondering what you've been up to since you were last on the podcast.
Well, I mean, when was I last on? It was about a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
episode 300.
Yeah, 300. So it was me, LGO and Modern Vintage Gamer, weren't it? Obviously, mainly still doing the videos, still doing plenty of those. Doing wrestling now as well, aside from gaming.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that actually, but we'll get on to that in a bit.
I knew we'd get into the wrestling straight away, yeah.
I knew that would come up straight away.
Got to come up, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Your YouTube is chugging along, closing in on 100k subscribers.
It's getting there. Yeah, it's almost there.
Almost there.
The last 10k.
Last 10k, almost on 20 million views as well. I was doing my research earlier on.
It's mad.
It's still packed every week. Your episodes are absolutely amazing, or I'd say documentaries.
Thank you.
Absolutely love your A to Z of arcade companies, which are absolutely huge. I can imagine that's a bit of a massive undertaking to make those videos.
Oh, they can be, for sure. I mean, I love doing them because it's a great journey of discovery. Because, I mean, for a lot of arcade companies, especially ones like Konami, Data East, Namco, there's the main ones that everybody knows, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you actually go and look through, there's normally so many other games that you just don't know at all. I mean, especially in the case, Namco was the one that I most recently did.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably around half of the games in there, or certainly in some of the episodes, it seemed like around half, never even left Japan. Including some games from some like fairly pretty big series, never left Japan. So these are games that a lot of people, and there's things nowadays. Arcade Archives, for example, have released quite a lot of Namco stuff over the past few years. But there's still a lot out there that's almost like very unknown and quite underrated. Well, sometimes it can be almost the case, well, okay, you can see why this didn't come out. Obviously there's all your Mahjong games and like different quiz tiles and that, but then there's a lot of stuff and you think, why didn't this get a worldwide release?
I wonder how you do your research, Kim, because like your YouTube videos are pretty long, and I've done a few YouTube videos in the past, and just researching like a 7-minute video can take weeks. So I was just wondering how you do it and what you use as your sources.
For me, it kind of ends up going down a rabbit hole. I try to, if I can, use as much stuff that's as close to the time that I'm covering as I can get. I go through the archives. Try and go through a lot of the magazines, the trade papers, and that's all available. Obviously, if sources of like interviews can be found as well, obviously that's always helpful. If it's done after the fact, but if I can get like news articles from the time about a certain game being discussed that ended up never coming out, or say with something like a company like Mastertronic, I think was the last company I covered in detail. Like getting the interviews that someone like Richard Alp, who was quite outspoken about Mastertronic and the impact they were going to have, getting his thoughts from the time, I think is always what I want to have in my videos. I want to have like something that brings you closer to that time period.
So what I love about your channel as well is that you cover videos that wouldn't necessarily get like huge amount of views, but are really interesting. So something like the story of Hugo is quite a kind of bizarre thing, but absolutely fascinating. And then covering like Top Banana as well, which is a legendary kind of nightmarish platform.
Ridiculous piece of work that. The funny thing about something like Hugo is that came from, because I do live streaming as well, and live streaming often tends to be discovering games at random. Like I'm currently doing a wheel that's like nothing but Euro platform games that were released on the Amiga. And one stream, for some reason, one of my viewers, actually a guy called Morton, who does some wonderful sculptures, suggested playing a game. Oh, well, you should play a game called Super Oswald. And it turns out it's one of those old touch-tone games that used to be on Danish. Like, Super Oswald is basically the predecessor of Hugo when it comes to like touch-tone phone gaming. And from there, I think, playing that, you then suddenly go down the rabbit hole, you think, and you think, I want to look into the history of this a bit more. And then, so just from like that little bit, like playing it for like 5 to 10 minutes on a stream and thinking, what on earth's going on here? Eventually, we end up with a full video out of it.
And it's kind of like that Euro gaming that's been really missed, and Americans probably look at it and go, what is this? I think most people in Europe look at it and go, what is this?
Oh yes, some of the stuff that you end up playing, especially when you end up trying to do like a completist wheel like that, you think, what on earth were they even thinking with this? The ideas are just so harebrained.
What I love about it, and harebrained is actually a really good word there, but like that story of Hugo one, when I spotted that a couple of months ago, it's like something that was in like the deep, dark crevices of my brain that I haven't thought about for like 30 years. And you're like, oh my God. And I love that about your channel, because there's so many like obscure but really interesting things that you will cover. You won't just cover like,
touchstone.
Yeah, like, here's this terrible game, or here's this fantastic game. Here's this really weird and wonderful game, toys for Sega Genesis that nobody ever talks about, for example. Yes. I just absolutely love that. But what I also love is, I mentioned earlier on your documentaries, not got around to watching this one yet, but your A to Z of Namco is 2 parts, and it's 3 parts, 6 hours. Oh yeah, there it is. 7.5 hours, the third part for the whole thing, which is just absolutely incredible. What can you tell us about kind of like what goes into that? Just effort. How long's the turnaround on something like that?
I mean, I have to be honest, the main part of something like that purely really is playing the games.
Yeah.
Like, is playing them all and experiencing them and getting my own thoughts of them. I mean, when you're talking about something like that, I mean, with the A to Z of them coming, in the end total, there's probably over 150 games there. So you're looking at 150 games. You're probably looking at 2 minutes per game a lot of the time. So not too long. Sometimes a bit longer, especially if it's something quite important, like, say, if you're looking at something like Galaxian 3, for example.
Yeah.
And looking at something that Namco was showing at their theme park in one of possibly the biggest cabinet that there's ever been for a single game, could seat about 20 people. Obviously, then that's when like kind of the research does start to come out, rather than just like little curious tidbits here and there. But yeah, a lot of that. I mean, when I do a video like that, I like to think of it as much of the journey of discovery for me personally, as I hope it's a journey of discovery to those watching. Like looking at games and thinking, wow, I've literally never heard of this game at all and it looks fantastic, or, oh my goodness, I've never heard of this game and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
Well, also the kind of connection to the modern scene as well, because one that I love was Football Glory, and, the kind of history of Crow Team as well. We just had Mike Wilson on the podcast of Digital Devolver, talking about Crow Team and how important they were in the kind of rebirth of Serious Sam. So, you can get a modern audience that will also come and look at that and then find out about their roots and where it all started.
A fiercely independent studio like Crow Team, who have always marched to the beat of their own drum. They've always I think they've never really chased like the commercial side of things, have they? They've just done
what they thought was cool.
We want to do something like the Talos Principle now, and for the most part, it ends up working out.
So I just got distracted looking at your Hooligans video there, though. But I have to ask, your Final Fantasy videos always blow up. Final Fantasy VIII, over 1 million plays. Final Fantasy VII recently, 400,000 plays. What makes you... Is it just a love of the Final Fantasy series? Or is it hype? What makes you kind of divert away from the arcade and Amiga stuff that you usually cover?
I mean, Final Fantasy VII was one of the biggest games for me growing up. I mean, when I got a PlayStation, I think the same story as a lot of people. So that one in particular has always stuck me. And with something like an RPG video, that's something like, I don't play RPGs much, but every now and again it's like, oh, I really want to go deep into an RPG and then end up doing a rather significant video on it. Like, Again, in a lot of times it's about because a lot of times they're not something that I've played before. I mean, the last one I did RPG was Phantasy Star, which I did last year, and funnily enough, I mean, I've still got I've got 2 and 4 of those captures as well, and I'm kind of waiting for the right time to actually then. It's like, well, I've got these captured. At some point, the video will be made. Like you do end up with a lot of projects that take a long time to actually then come to fruition.
Yeah,
there's often big gaps. And then suddenly you come back to it and it's like, I've got an angle to actually work on this now. It's like eventually, I mean, a lot of people have always requested for me to do Final Fantasy IX. And eventually it will happen.
Yeah.
Just not sure when yet.
I love that one.
You've also done a lot of writing and contributions to magazines and stuff. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I mean, I did a fair bit for Retro Gamer. Done a good few articles for them over the years. I did last kind of print magazine I wrote for. I had a monthly spot in a Wireframe.
Oh, yeah. Great magazine, Wireframe.
Great magazine, yeah. Sadly, no longer in print, but that was good fun. Just kind of almost get a chance to talk about whatever, essentially. Like, I kind of had a pretty open brief to just make a column and have a little, not rant, but like almost talk about something that I found curious.
I guess your writing is kind of behind the scenes when you're doing scripts for your videos and research and stuff, and then having that put out in public.
Oh yes, because I've always
be
been quite long-winded.
Quite satisfying.
Well, doing doing writing to like a professional standard, like for a magazine, or indeed to what we're going to be talking about, is something that's definitely helped my own writing for my videos. Because I do. Obviously, generally, I do write a lot. Like normally, a good few thousand words goes into each video, I would say. Because they are just mostly me talking. So, I mean, if you don't like my voice, you're probably kind of in trouble. Because it's mainly me talking.
Yeah, but it's very interesting.
Good.
So, obviously you have a massive love for the Amiga and as well of a real love for the arcade scene, which we'll get onto a little bit more in a moment. But what, particularly the 80s, would you say the 80s are the greatest era of the arcade? Or do you think the 90s edges it out a little bit?
It's a tough one for me, you see, because I was born in the middle of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first arcade experiences came in 1991, 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So that was obviously the time that's closest to my heart, personally.
Yeah.
But then I also think when you go to a Golden Age game, one of the classics from the Golden Age, whether it be Missile Command or Gyruss or Tempest or Robotron, I think perhaps especially, it's something very different still, but still resonates. It still feels like it's not aged today because I almost feel like when you play a Golden Age game, you're right at the heart of what makes gaming so appealing. Because, in a way, mainly because it is quite simple. It's very much stripped down to like the certain memorable blasts of sound. Like if you think of something like a Williams game and how loud they are, how it's almost like. Well, because how it's almost like playing a pinball machine only in a video game, because that was kind of their background, doing pins before video. So they brought that in there, and it's just smacking you round the face. It's quite an intense experience that still is very tough to get from games these days.
I guess also, when you're in the arcades, then the 80s ones were probably a bit cheaper to play on.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, so you had a bit more access. I remember you doing a bit about Southend's arcade scene as well, and some kind of local history. Were you thinking about doing that with more places as well?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. If I'd love to go around to various see what's not necessarily what's still existing, but I mean, there's a lot more newer arcades now as well.
Yeah,
which is always handy. There seem to be more and more of those cropping up across the country.
Like the arcade clubs and places like that.
Arcade clubs. I believe there's one new happening in Walsall, I think, last I heard. It seems like there's more and more coming. And all over the country as well, not just in the north, which is kind of what it used to be. But yeah, you've got the new ones coming up. You've got old ones that also still kick around. You've still got Las Vegas in London, which I believe is Electrocoin's old place. That's still there. A lot of those places it's mainly ticket machines now. Yeah. But even still, it's nice that they're still kicking. Same as with a lot of the places down my way, down Southend.
I was in Skegness and I found a pinball machine at the very back. Just still going.
Yeah.
You can kind of spot a few little things in places still.
I was in Skegness not last week, the week before, and I dragged my family in all the arcades trying to find a dusty old House of the Dead or something at the corner, but it didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is still a very nice Outrun 2 kicking around in Southend.
Oh, there
Circus.
Nice. So
it's always good to see.
Obviously, we spoke about arcades. We're going to speak a little bit more about it now. Your love of it is phenomenal, and you are going to be launching a book, the Arcade Decade 80s edition.
Yes.
Give us the inside scoop. Give us the overview before we pick your brains, because I've seen the preview of it, and this looks absolutely fantastic.
So, this is something that's been kicking around my head. It's been kicking around my head for years. It was part of a discussion with a good friend of mine, a guy called Chris. Actually, even before lockdown, we were talking about it.
Wow.
We were talking about potentially working together and doing a book, because Chris, my friend, works for Numskull. And time passes, the project kind of things fall by the wayside due to lockdown. And it's 2 years ago, and that we kind of got back thinking about it and thought, what sort of things should we do? And we'd kind of drift around doing arcades back then. Because my idea has always been I wanted to do an arcade book, but I didn't necessarily want to do an arcade book that was just about the games themselves. I thought it would be really nice to do an arcade book that was also about the cabinets, that was also about the stories behind the games, because I think that's a good half of the arcade experience right there. And of course, nowadays it's so easy and such a godsend. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I weren't able to go and play games in MAME, because 99% of arcade games haven't ever really come out outside of MAME.
Yeah.
The only trouble is with MAME is that, obviously you can get things like decals and various extra things that can emulate, but it's not like actually playing on a cabinet, and seeing that original artwork and the differences between cabinets as well, because they're not all necessarily just the same generic, I suppose, Electrocoin Goliath generic 1 stick and 3
And
button
I
setup.
guess, like the control systems and the layouts are completely different as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's so many games. I mean, when I think of like some of the games that are covered, there's some games that you still can't really... It's tough to experience properly unless you're playing the arcade. Something like Defender, for example, has so many different controls and is laid out in such a way, or Missile Command, or certainly Battlezone, where you have to look through the eyes of the camera, when you have to actually look through the scope. There's all these little differences that actually make the game what they are that you don't necessarily get in MAME. Or if I think back to ports of certain games that were around back then, something like Tubin, for example. I mean, Tubin's not necessarily the most memorable of 90 games. It's a game that I deeply enjoy. But no port of Tubin was ever able to really get it right, certainly not on the microcomputers, certainly not on the Spectrum or C64, because they couldn't quite emulate the button bashing that was necessary for a game like Tubin, like frantically bashing the buttons to either get down rapids or brake or, turn. They had to try and do a more traditional, had to try and do it with a joystick and a single button, and it just couldn't quite, it wasn't quite right. So all these different things, just beyond like the technical aspect of the games, like, this game they use a 68,000 processor, so obviously it's not going to be the same on a Z80 computer like the ZX Spectrum. Like, that's sort of just been too technical. The cabinets themselves are kind of the main reason why playing in an arcade is so different from playing in a home.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. And I think what caught my eye when I was looking at it earlier on was exactly what you've just said there. It's the cabinet build and the hardware descriptions as well. And I don't know if that's just me getting older, and I've seen a lot of these games, but I found that really interesting that there's going to be all about the actual hardware as well. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. The nostalgia for it is, it's not just the feel of the cabinet and the look of it, it's the smell of it, and
yes,
I think
the age that comes off it.
Absolutely, the age and everything. It just like it oozes the 80s. And
it's those little fins, isn't it? It's like when you play an original Cuba that still has a working solenoid.
Yeah,
the knocker
bangs.
on there. Yeah.
The knocker, that knocks when either you or Coily falls off, and you think, "Holy, is the machine just about to blow up?"
And just
like, what?
the fonts as well, especially of that period. There's some really beautiful artwork on there. And,
the artwork. Something.
Marquees,
Absolutely, the marquees. I mean, a lot of them are works of art. I mean, Crystal Castles is something I could happily. You could put that anywhere. It's just glorious. It's like MC Escher on. It's so cliche to say, it's MC Escher on acid. But it's kind of like that. It's of its time, but still beautiful. Or Centipede.
Yeah.
Another example, just beautiful artwork.
Yeah.
And sometimes not so good artwork. I mean, you look at the Western version of Pac-Man and you look at the art of Flack and you think, geez, how on earth did that get so successful? It doesn't look anything like him.
No, it doesn't.
He's got legs.
And he got a big nose as well.
He's got a big nose and legs. It's like, how did that get successful? But hey ho.
So obviously it's going to be a big deep dive into the 80s arcade scene.
That's the idea, yeah.
Which companies are going to be featured in the book? Tell us who's going to be in the book, what's going to be in the book.
Oh, all your big hitters, obviously. Obviously, you're going to have your Sega, you're going to have your Namco, your technical trailblazers. You got your Ataris and all that. Some quite smaller, not necessarily as well-known games. I did manage to squeeze one UK name in there.
Oh, yeah.
Did manage to squeeze in Century Electronics and Hunchback. So I've got a little bit of representation. Hunchback is fine. It's quite it's quite an underpowered arcade even for the time. And we're talking like 1984.
Okay.
It's very underpowered. but it's a fine enough game.
Yeah.
So names like that. Obviously going to have a big an A to Z of the companies in the book as well, talking about other names that again are known to like people who know the arcades, but not necessarily known to like more casual ones, like names that haven't been around for a while, like say Cinematronics. Cinematronics, Dragon's Lair is obviously the first thing that springs to mind there. Or Leland, who did a Super Off-Road. Like all these companies have like these tiny little stories that are worth talking about. And I think the main thing as well is also just trying to get people's heads into like the arcade space and a lot of the lingo that was used back then as well. is another big part of the book.
I read about the lingo part. So what's the plan there? So you're going to kind of like just explain the lingo, or is it going to just be in there and we're going to have to work it out? How's that going to work? Because I did see that.
Oh, no. There's going to be a big glossary.
Nice. Cool.
Because there's a lot of names. There's a lot of phrases and turns of phrase that have kind of fallen out of favour over the time. I mean, when was the last time you heard someone use the word board to describe a level?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I mean, you don't hear that anymore. You don't hear like people used to say, oh, board. It's this is the first board of Donkey Kong. This is the first sheet.
Yeah.
And I mean, people stopped using that because that was back when levels were mostly single screen.
Yeah.
And so when levels started scrolling more, it didn't necessarily make sense to say board anymore. Or other names that have fallen out of fashion. I mean, Vidiot used to be very popular. I mean, Vidiot actually kind of was something that predated video games, but then kind of came back into fashion when video games started to become a thing. But also, it's not just necessarily terms of phrase, also just other magazines and trade shows and TV shows even. Like there's a little bit on something like Starcade in there, like the classic American show with Blake Edwards, where you could see the games being played and people could win prizes, like having little bits like that. Or Aladdin's Castle, which was such a huge arcade line back in the day. Just, little things like that. And some of the entries also go into, like, again, little things outside the game, like something like track and field, like, got to have a little something in there about what was, for a long time, the biggest esports tournament ever for track and field.
Wow.
Like, and that's what kind of sets
thousands
it apart.
of people showed up.
That's what sets it apart, having these like little facts and, interesting tidbits that only you would put in that, kind of makes it unique and really complements your kind of video style that you do.
There's kind of, there's, I think there's definitely similarities to like how I make a video and how I kind of did these entries. I mean, obviously I think the thing with this, obviously having to be a lot more concise.
Yes.
It's like, I have 2 pages for each entry. Well, in fact, not even 2 pages really. I have virtually 1 page for each entry because then there's obviously a lot of space there. It's taken up by looking at the artwork. I mean, it is in many ways, it's half art book, half writing, hence, it being a coffee table book in the end.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's not you crazily printing it yourself like we did. You're working with someone, Numbskull Designs, who...
No, this certainly has been far from a one-person job.
Yeah, they've previously done From Coin-Ops to Tabletops as well, which was a really nice quality book as well. So how did you get involved with Numbskull Designs?
Again, I'd say it was through my good friend Chris, who is Games You Loved. Big shout out to Chris on Games You Loved on all social media platforms. It was through being friends with him, like that we kind of got talking about it, and that was kind of my road in, and their design skills and the photography as well. Like the photography, I mean, because again, that was for me like one of the biggest things of the book is like having to have original photography.
Yeah, of the actual original machines, which and tracking down is a really tough
And again,
thing.
that's something, of course, we'll get to another very important contribution. But like having original photography is certainly a great privilege, I think, for this book, and something I'm so happy that I'm able to have in it.
It's good because
sets it apart.
You've got like the wear and tear in there as well on the photography.
Yes.
It's not like, some book, they could do a 3D render or they could have, a pristine version. And it's kind of nice to see that these things have aged.
Absolutely, yes. It's really nice again. They've done such a fantastic job with the design of the book and with those pictures. It's a joy to look at.
So how did you then source the arcades for the photography?
Okay, so that was mainly a Numbskull thing. I mean, Numbskull already had a working relation with Replay Events.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great, yeah.
And so, Replay Events, who do Play Expo and all of that, and also have their own arcade, which they've had for the past few years in Milton Keynes, called the Pixel Bunker. So essentially, it was kind of a bit of a logistical effort to get to go through Replay, because they've got all these different arcades in all different spaces. It's like, well, here's the ones we have at Play Expo, here's ones that are at Pixel Bunker, here's ones that are in a warehouse somewhere. And so, over the course of a few days, kind of getting them all together in Milton Keynes, because the shoot was done at Pixel Bunker, and then taking the pictures of like all of them, and also trying to make sure to have a really good image as well for the front cover.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously, as the first thing you see, that's got to be something striking.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I think a fantastic job's been done there. Like, I think it does a great job of, like,
It
immediately
captures.
putting you inside that arcade, capturing the time.
It looks like to me either it's been done so well it takes me back to Shredder's lair on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the film, or RoboCop in is it RoboCop 2 when he goes through the
RoboCop
arcade?
2, where they're all Data East games. I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
Just all Data East games.
Yeah, I always wondered that as well. Was it tough to kind of track down the hardware specs? Because as I say, I love that that's going to be in there. I know a lot of the games use the same boards. A lot of these arcades use the same arcade boards and stuff.
There's a lot of things to be. There are some fantastic resources for that sort of thing, which, again, I could not have done the book without. I mean, with the technical information, I mean, obviously, quite a lot of that is in MAME as well when you load it up. Like, MAME always gives you, like, certain, sound processor things. But there's places like System 16 is one place. KLOV, the killer list of video games, the Arcade Museum. These are incredible resources. I mean, I had to have a little bit about the killer list of video games in the glossary section because that's been around. I didn't even realise. I knew it had been around for a while. It's been around since the 1980s.
Wow.
It actually dates back to the decade, like late 80s, early 90s. It's actually been kicking around bulletin boards it started on. Like, people gradually compiled this list, and it's been maintained since then and features everything from, the most famous arcade games of all time to What the Butler Saw machines from 1903.
Wow.
This has everything. Now, if an operator was in charge of it, it's in this webpage. I mean, so yeah, beautiful resources that are things that I could not have done the book without.
Why do you think we're seeing a kind of resurgence in arcades? I know you mentioned there was a lot of ticket machines in places, but we're also seeing these arcade bars, and we're seeing, stuff like the one-up machines that people are having in their houses.
I think, we all know that things are generally changing when it comes to like a never-ending battle of digital versus physical. And we know that and in the home, physical media is fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
Like, that's clear. So, in a sense, I think that a lot of people, physical media, in a sense, then kind of perhaps turns into more of an event. Whether it's getting a limited edition of something or actually going to a place where you can experience something physically and not just like something that's been downloaded. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I think also a part of it is that it's still something quite flashy. I mean, in these times, like, we're all looking for like some sort of incentive to go out. That's perhaps more than just going out drinking or just going out for a meal. You're looking for something a bit more because of how much it costs. And I think with places like Arcade Club, with places like NQ64, I think one of the reasons why they're so successful is because they offer like all these different things in one place. Like, yes, you can drink there. Yes, you can play games there, and you can play all different
It becomes a destination, doesn't it?
It's a destination. Yeah, it's a destination event for like any sort of night out, whether it's like something that someone goes to more regularly to, or people take their kids to it, or a whole party from an office goes there.
Yeah,
and I kind of love that also quite a lot of them focus on the original arcades, and that requires, someone with expert knowledge, and suddenly you're getting people employed in the kind of arcade world again and going around trying to repair these old machines. I've started seeing people are creating like little drop-in replacement chips and stuff to kind of keep them going.
Yes, I mean, again, in the book, talking about Laserdisc games, like Dragon's Lair, like Firefox, and how, well, the hardware for those games is most of it is dead now.
And they were notoriously bad.
They wore out. They were notoriously bad then because the amount of seeking that those machines had to do and the lengthy operating times, the lengthy times that they won, they just burnt out. They just burnt out completely. But nowadays, things exist like solutions, Laserdisc emulation that can be used inside the arcades that allow these games to still be experienced in more of an original form, whether it be Dragon's Lair or Space Ace or anything else like that, which I think is, again, absolutely brilliant. And so many people are still, making parts for other aspects of arcade machines that can be unreliable things like trackballs and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, the rollers in that, again, often have to be replaced, but they still happen. And other things like people are making light guns even.
Yeah.
No, I went to the USA and I was amazed at the amount of new pinball machines that are coming out, and there's a whole kind of industry there.
It's still huge there, yeah.
Yeah, have you tried to do kind of a worldwide span of arcades and ones that are popular in certain regions?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, we've tried to make sure to cater everyone. I mean, there's more than just having like the one UK obviously machine. No, I think there's a very even split of between USA and Japan in terms of the origins of games. There's some games that were certainly more popular, I feel, in Europe than they were in other territories.
Yeah.
And likewise others that obviously were where Japan was the main destination for the game. I think there's a fair representation of around the world of like areas where certain games were popular.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask, actually, with there being over 100 arcades featured in it, you've kind of sort of answered it there, and it's obviously such a rich history, especially with the 80s. Was it tough to kind of decide on those 100, or did you instantly have like a list of like, here's 50 games that have got to be in it, these are my top 50?
Ooh, heavens. I mean, it was hard to make it was hard to come to the final 100. Because, I mean, I'm sure that anyone can look at the list of games and then think, oh, this one's not there, this one's not there, this one's not there. Because there's so many, obviously, very famous arcades. Like, when you actually start to put it down the list, you think, you get over 100 in no time at all. So it was hard to pare it all down to, like, right, these are the 100 that we're doing. But then also, the idea for this is not necessarily for it to just be one book.
Yeah.
So if at some point, we go back to the 1980s, because there could easily be a second volume of 1980s games, easily. Then there's big names that are there that can be covered in the second volume.
Would you like to get any of the like original developers involved? Have you got any quotes from any of the original developers of the games?
I mean, that would be fantastic. I think, hopefully, as the series goes on, there can be more and more of that, as, kind of it establishes further reputation. I mean, there's been a couple of people who were tremendously helpful. I mean, Steve Golson was one person in particular. We had a very long chat. Steve Golson, one of the guys behind Miss Pac-Man, and which again is another arcade with an incredible story. I mean, so many people do still think of that, I think, as like, oh, it's just Pac-Man with a female hero, when there's actually so many other differences. It's a whole new game, essentially, in many ways. And the story behind it is also incredible. So getting in touch with like the people I could was very special, and again was something that really helped, not just in features for that game in particular, but for the whole rest of the book.
How long have you been at it, Kim?
I mean, the main intense period of writing was through most of 2023. Well, for last couple of months of 2022 until I'd say at least half 2023. So that was kind of a main period, a good solid year of kind of doing it, but also not still like maintaining the channel as well. Like, I didn't want to, the channels to then suffer greatly because of the books, and also keeping it under wraps as well. So yeah, between that and like researching as well as writing, I mean, it's been almost like a year and a half, I would say. So
do you expect it to pretty much come out pretty quickly then?
I reckon so. I reckon it will certainly be out, I'd say spring of next year.
Nice.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good time frame to have.
And my last question is, what other features can backers expect and the readers expect? I've noticed that you've got an extra trivia and Legacy Beyond the 80s section in there. Can you tell me more about that? Yes,
I mean, the extra trivia and the Legacy in the 80s is something that, like, gradually I hope that we get more with each entry, in that there's going to be something that you'll find in each entry aside from just descriptions of the books. We're also going to try and get a lot of people together so that a lot of people can talk about their own memories of the decade.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So, which I think would be good if we just get a whole load of people together. Like, obviously people from the time, people who do YouTube and so on, journalists and so forth. And I think that would be a good thing to add to the book. And perhaps as well as we go through the process of the Kickstarter, with discussions that other things might come up. You never know.
Awesome.
I got beaten up in the 80s by a load of punks in an arcade.
By arcade rats.
I got beat up by
that's one of-
RoboCop while I was in an arcade.
Yeah. That's one of my favourite slangs from the book, arcade rat.
Nice.
Well, I was wondering, when does it launch, and how can people back it, and what does it cost?
The Kickstarter is going to be launching on the 16th of August.
Which is today for listeners who are listening to us right now on the day of release. And how much is it going to be?
So, there's various options for the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's the PDF option. I mean, there's early bird options as well. So an early bird PDF is as little as £5.
Oh, cool.
And an early bird for the hardback book is £30.
Nice.
So those are your early bird options, and then obviously they increase from there. And if you do want a signed one or even a personalised one, obviously there's options for that too. So there's various different ways to be able to back the book.
And I think a really good thing is that you're working with Numskull, because they've already got a big distribution network as well, and they're able to get it around the world, which is quite tough, as we realised when we did ours with.
I would
all
not
kinds
be
of
able
things.
to do this. I would not be able to do this without them. Like, there's no way that I'd be able to get a book like this to such a level, or even really at all, if it wasn't for having Numskull. I mean, it's something that I've always thought about. Like, a lot of people have often said, "Oh, you should write a book," and it's like, yeah, cool, but it's like then all the headaches that come with it beyond just doing the writing. So having Numskull in my corner for this, I mean, has been an absolute privilege and joy to work with, and to make this possible, and it's something I'm very proud of.
Well, do you have any future plans for the channel as well, and any other projects, or are you just going to wait and see what happens with the book, and then...
The channel will always be a thing, or the channels, I should say, will always be a thing. I always end up doing stuff. I mean, the channel's always kind of marched to the beat of my own drum. I kind of just talk about whatever kind of springs to mind, whatever floats my boat at that moment, whether it be something gaming or something from wrestling. I mean, I think that always has to change as like what people enjoy in the retro gaming scene changes. Perhaps I think in the future I may end up talking a lot more about PS2 stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's certainly kind of the height of retro at the moment in a lot of ways. And then eventually it's going to go beyond that. We're going to be regularly talking about the Xbox 360 and the PS3 as retro. Mm. And then we're all going to feel very old.
It all starts to move on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it all moves on. It can't just be Mega Drive and SNES and that forever. As much as those were the consoles that were a big thing when I was a kid.
Yeah,
but there's just means that there's more stuff to talk about in the end, so it's all good.
And very quickly before we wrap up, quickly tell us about your wrestling channel you've got now.
So yes, I also have a channel called Kim Justice's Wrestling Road, which kind of very similar to the gaming channel, only talking about another incredible passion of mine. I mean, I've loved professional wrestling since I was 6-7 years old, and it's kind of gone on from there. So that often mostly goes into Japanese wrestling a lot of the time, pro res, and talking about the history of that and people who were famous there, or various other interesting events that happened. Again, it's something that's kind of a niche, similar to the sort of niche that retro gaming is, especially retro gaming of the UK microcomputers.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that people have responded really well to, and that's gone from strength to strength over the past couple of years that I've been doing it. So another string to add to the bow. Who knows, again, there may be even more strings to add to the bow. I can never tell. I always have these wild ideas. It's like, I should do a channel on this. And it's like, I should do a channel. I had an idea of let's do a channel about progressive rock albums. And then in the cold light of day, you think, actually, no, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't add that string to the bow.
Well, you did it with obscure wrestling, and you're on 20k subs on there, so well done. Maybe there's something in it.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows? We shall see. Can never tell.
Well, Kim, it's been awesome having you on again, and good luck with the book.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting as always.